You need to attend, you need to participate, you need to do the assignment. What was the assignment I gave you last time?
Difference between English.
The difference between EFL and ESL. And last time we discussed some basic, I'm not how I'm saying this word, basic terminology in the field of EFL. About EFL and ESL, what is English or how is English taught in Egypt? Is it foreign language or second language? Foreign language. We said foreign language. And why? Because of what was the magic word? Exposure. In ESL, we have more exposure than in EFL. Learning EFL, students are exposed to the target language very little. But in ESL, the learners are exposed to the language much in many situations. I asked you last time to give me 5 or as many differences as you can between ESL and EFL. Let's discuss this. Who can tell me one major difference between EFL and ESL? The students who searched this on the internet. Anybody can give us any clues? Yes?
ESL, English as second language, is taught in a country in which the English language is the dominant language.
Very good. It's the native language and it is the source language, English. But in foreign language context, the target language is not, it's English. It's different from the source language. We talked about source language last time, and we said sometimes we would say source language, or mother tongue, or first language, or Arabic. These 4 terms mean the same. Okay? So when we say source language, we refer to Arabic. First language, Arabic. Mother tongue, Arabic. Okay? When we say target language is what? English. And the English is taught in Egypt as a foreign language. So one difference between EFL and ESL is, as your friend here said, it is spoken outside the classroom in ESL. It is not used outside the classroom in EFL. So in EFL, we don't use the target language outside the classroom. But in ESL, we use it outside the classroom. Because the dominant language outside the classroom is the target language that we learn. In ESL, the dominant language outside the classroom is the target language that we learn. So this is a major difference. What else? Yes. What's your name? I forgot your name. Aya, sorry.
Teachers in ESL teach English. Their native language should be English.
Very good. So the teachers who teach ESL are native language of the target language. So if you are learning English as a second language in America, the teachers that will be teaching you will be Americans. So in ESL, the teachers are native speakers of the target language. In EFL, the teachers are non-native speakers. So this is a major difference. So in ESL, the teachers are native speakers. But in EFL, the teachers are non-native speakers, like you are. We are non-native speakers of English. So, and still, we teach English as a foreign language. So, the majority of teachers in ESL contexts are native speakers, whereas the majority of teachers in EFL contexts are what? Non-native speakers. You understand? So, in Egypt, who teaches English? Non-native speakers of English. But in America or in Britain or in Canada, they are almost native speakers. You can find some non-native speakers, but the majority or 95% of the teachers are native speakers. In Egypt, you can find a native speaker who is teaching English. In the British Council, for example, or in the American University, if you are taking a course there, you will be exposed to a native speaker. This does not mean that English is taught as a second language, it's still taught as a foreign language. What's another difference? Good.
ESL is easier than to gain from
ESL is easier to gain than a EFL. Very good. So, level of difficulty, which is more difficult to attain EFL, which is less difficult to attain ESL, because of the term, as we said in the beginning, the term what? Exposure. Because of exposure. So one is difficult to attain and one is easier to attain. Understand? Which is easier to attain? ESL. Which is more difficult to attain? EFL. Another difference. Good. Very good. Very good. We have the two terms that you should be aware of: accuracy versus fluency. Accuracy versus fluency. In ESL, we emphasize fluency. In EFL, we emphasize accuracy. Let's discuss the difference between accuracy and fluency. Accuracy, to be able to produce the target language grammatically sound. Understand? So, when we talk about accuracy, the word accuracy means the learner will be able to produce the target language grammatically correct. Okay? Fluency, the student will be able to express himself freely even if the grammar is not correct. So the focus is on how many words can you generate in a conversation. This is fluency. But in accuracy, whether the words that you generated are grammatically correct or not. So in ESL, we favor what? Fluency. In EFL, we are after accuracy. So when you learn English as a foreign language, you tend to produce grammatically correct sentences. But in ESL, it doesn't matter whether you say, how are you doing? But in EFL, you say, how are you doing? Usually, you tend to use more slang in EFL. In EFL, you use standard English. In ESL, you use slang language. Understand? So we have accuracy versus fluency. In which context accuracy is dominant? ESL or EFL? Huh? Accuracy. EFL. Fluency. ESL. Very good. Another difference. Well, you are right. Your friend here is referring to an interesting difference between how we prepare the lesson planning in ESL versus EFL. In ESL, we prepare the lesson differently. How? Can you elaborate more? The point is good. In ESL, the teacher uses lots of worksheets. In ESL, the teacher uses lots of worksheets. And in ESL, the teacher does not stick to the textbook. In ESL, the teacher does not stick to the textbook. But in EFL, the teacher has to follow a certain format. He doesn't use too many worksheets. He doesn't go outside the textbook because he has a syllabus that he should follow. But usually the syllabus in ESL is more flexible than in EFL. What do we mean by syllabus? The topics that should be covered within a course. So the word syllabus means what are you going to cover in this course. We referred to the syllabus of this course last time, right? I told you last time that our syllabus is basically about teaching the 4 language skills and the 4 language elements, besides the various methods of teaching EFL. This is what we discussed last time. I said for this course, you will be equipped by some skills to enable you to teach the 4 language skills. What are the 4 language skills? Listening, speaking, reading, writing. So we will teach you how to teach speaking, how to teach listening, how to teach reading, how to teach writing. And also we will teach you how to teach language elements. We have something called language elements and language skills. Language elements are like what? Vocabulary, grammar, or structure. Spelling comes under writing, for example. We have major language elements: culture, pronunciation, vocabulary, and the grammar. These are the 4 language elements: grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and culture. And we have 4 language skills. So we'll have about 8 sessions to cover these topics. These topics combined are called what? The syllabus. Yes. So what's the syllabus for this course? The syllabus is teaching language skills, teaching language elements. Besides, familiarizing you with the most important teaching language methods. Okay? So our topics that we'll be discussing throughout the course center around language skills, language elements, and the major language teaching methods in the field of EFL. Understand? So back to what your friend was saying. In EFL, the teacher is not flexible. Okay? He is, we can say, what's the opposite of flexible? What's the opposite of flexible in English?
Complex.
Flexible means he adds something to the syllabus. But in EFL, he is not flexible. He has to stick to what should be taught within the textbook. So one is flexible and one is rigid, R-I-G-I-D. Rigid, R-I-G-I-D. So the opposite of flexible is rigid. Rigid, he doesn't change his mind. He doesn't change anything out of the syllabus. But in EFL, in ESL, he can add. He can provide the students with some worksheets. He can give them some newspapers to talk about in the classroom. This is in ESL. But in EFL, if you do this, your inspector will come and say, your supervisor, you are doing something which is not necessary, and he will not approve that in EFL. Because in EFL, we have a syllabus to follow. In ESL, there is a syllabus, but the syllabus is more flexible. Understand? Good point. What else? Yes?
Spelling of syllables is
Syllabus, not syllables. S-Y-L-L. Let me write it. English methods. This is syllabus. This is what we are talking about. Different from syllables. We are not talking about this. Now, we are talking about syllabus. Syllabus means the group or the set of topics to cover within a course. What are we going to cover within this course? This is called syllabus. Understand? What's syllabus in Arabic? مقرر. مجموعة المقررات. مجموعة الموضوعات في المنهج. Syllabus. Okay? A set of topics to be covered within a course. A set of topics, مجموعة موضوعات to be covered within a course. So in EFL, the syllabus is rigid or flexible? Rigid. Rigid. This is the word rigid. R-I-G-I-D. But in EFL, we said in EFL, the syllabus is rigid. In ESL, the syllabus is flexible. Okay? Another difference. Yes, Marwa. Marwa. Are you Marwa?
Yes.
You are Marwa too?
Yes.
Great. So Marwa first, Marwa second.
Yes, and learners learn to communicate with people and everything. But the learners learn to only apply for.
Very good. This is a very good point. I will just use her words, but dress them with a different idea. Motivation. When we talk about motivation in language learning, in ESL versus EFL, motivation. What do you mean by motivation? Motivation answers the why of the behavior. Why we do things. So if you ask yourself a question, why am I doing this? In this case, you are answering a motivation question. Why do people learn the language, the target language? Of course, in ESL, it's different from in EFL. In ESL, it's called instrumental motivation. In ESL, we have a type of motivation called instrumental motivation. In ESL, it is integrative motivation. So we have two types of motivation in language learning. Instrumental versus integrative. Let me write this so that you spell it correctly. So we have instrumental and we have integrative. Okay, instrumental and integrative. In EFL, the type of motivation is called instrumental. In ESL, it is integrative. What's the difference between these two? In instrumental, EFL. Integrative, ESL. Well, this is it. Maybe yes, instrumental in EFL, integrative in ESL. What's the difference between instrumental motivation and integrative motivation? In instrumental motivation, you are pushed to do something for a particular specific reason. For example, you want to get a job. You want a pay raise in your salary. So you get an English course, you will be promoted, and one of the requirements of promotion is to be fluent in English. So you take a course in English to get your salary raise, to get a raise in your salary. This is instrumental. So instrumental motivation means you are motivated to do something for a particular specific reason. Like you have to take the course to pass, you have to study English to pass a course. English in Egypt is one of the requirements of our curriculum. We don't have any curriculum without English. So if you don't pass the course, you will fail. So this is instrumental. Integrative, you learn the language to become part of the society in which you live at. So integrative means you have to learn the language, otherwise you will not be able to function in the society. So which is more stronger, instrumental or integrative? Integrative. Integrative is more stronger than instrumental. Integrative motivation makes the target language like a matter of life or death for you. If you don't learn the target language, you will not survive in this society. But here, I don't want to learn English. So what? Nothing will happen. I will not get the raise. Okay. I will not be promoted. Okay. But integrative, you learn the language to become part of the culture of the target language. And that's why integrative motivation is stronger than instrumental motivation. So in Egypt, our learners are instrumentally motivated or integratively motivated? Instrumentally. It's okay to learn, but it's not that very important. If you are integratively motivated to learn something, this becomes a matter of life or death for you. I have to do it. If I don't do it, I will not survive. I remember one time when I was living in America, I lived there for a while, I was buying a car. And the salesman got a person from Romania. This was in the 80s. And that person could not speak English. And the salesman was asking him questions. The Romanian person could not answer the salesman. What type of car do you need? How much money would you like to spend? These questions. And the Romanian couldn't answer. And the salesman said, no, I'm not going to sell you a car. I was very surprised. I said, you refuse to sell a car for a customer? He said, yes. He can't even speak English. How will I give him a car? He can't speak English. So if you don't speak the language of the society in which you live, you are at a loss. You will lose so many things. You can't get a good job. So that's why integrative motivation is more important than instrumental motivation. So in ESL, the motivation is integrative. And in EFL, the motivation is instrumental. I saw some hands raised. Yes?
I'm going to explain some of the explanation why this happens.
Okay.
Abroad, so you will have interpretive motivation to speak in the country.
Yes, you are right. So the type of motivation in ESL differs from the type of motivation in EFL. How can we change motivation of our learners instead of being instrumental to become integrative? How can we do that? As language teachers, we can, as I said last time, we can switch the what? The pendulum. I used this expression. We need to switch the pendulum. You know the pendulum of the clock? The pendulum. This is the pendulum. Yes. We need as language teachers to switch or to shift the pendulum from EFL to ESL, from instrumental motivation to integrative motivation, from a non-native speakers to native speakers. We should do this. How? How can we do this? How can we change instrumental motivation to become almost like integrative? It will never be integrative, but we can push it a little bit to get closer to become integrative. How can we do this? Yes?
Encouraging our students to aim high.
To explain to our students the importance and necessity of learning English. If our learners realize that English is very important and they have to learn it and master it, not just to pass the exam, to be fluent in English, this is a blessing, this is an advantage, this is very important. That because everywhere, even in Egypt, you need English. If you can convince your students that learning the language is not just to pass the exam, but to, on the long run, if you want to join a good college, you have to be good in English. If you want to find a good job, you have to be good in English. If you want to travel to live in one of these English-speaking countries, you have to be good in English. Then we can shift the pendulum from instrumental to integrative. Understand? Yes. How many differences have we discussed so far? Let's summarize what we said. First difference, exposure. less, more, right? Huh? Another difference.
The nature of the language is native language. The native language.
You mean the teacher? Yeah, the teacher. Native versus non-native. What else? Accuracy. Accuracy versus fluency. What else? Motivation. Instrumental versus integrity. What else?
Lesson plan.
Syllabus. Flexible versus rigid. Easier, more difficult. Right? So we have so many areas that we can contrast EFL to ESL. The question that I would like you to think about, because I usually ask this question at the final examination. I say, suggest some techniques you can use as a language teacher to shift the pendulum from EFL to ESL. If we can act as language teachers that we are teaching ESL, not EFL, this way our learners will become very good in the language and will develop their language skills very fast and more competently. How can we change the pendulum from EFL to ESL? Give me 5 techniques. We discussed this before. We can reiterate it. Yes, what's your name? Please say your name when you answer. Minyada. Very good. We should minimize the amount of Arabic we use in the classroom. Okay? We should minimize the amount of Arabic we use in the classroom. The less Arabic you use, the more what you will give to your teachers. Huh? No, the magic word. Exposure. The more Arabic, the less Arabic you use in the classroom, the more exposure you give to your learner. And the more exposure, the more you are moving EFL to ESL. In a study that took place maybe about 12 or 15 years ago in the American University in Cairo, one of the scholars there conducted a research and they measured how many minutes our Egyptian learners use the language inside the classroom. They came up to the conclusion that they use English for 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Why? Because most of our teachers use what during the classroom? Arabic. Remember that when you teach English, it's not an Arabic class. It is what? An English class. And there is something that we should consider very carefully. We should not speak English all the time. Okay? When I'm saying, you want to pay money? When I am saying minimize the amount you use Arabic. I did not say exclude the Arabic language from the English class. I didn't say that. I said just minimize. So it's better for you, for example, to start Arabic about 25%, English 75%. And then gradually you increase the amount of English and you decrease the amount of Arabic. We call this weaning off your children. This is a nice term, weaning off your children in terms of using Arabic. Wean off. You know what's wean off? Weaning off your students. To wean off a child means to stop breastfeeding him. Mothers, when they have babies, they breastfeed their babies, right? Breastfeeding is healthier and more important than unnatural milk, breastfeeding. So after 1 year, the mother wants to stop her baby from breastfeeding, right? This is called weaning off your child. Fitam, very good. So, when you decrease the amount of Arabic little by little, you are weaning off your learner in terms of the target language you are using. Understand? So you start, as I said, 75% English, 25% Arabic, and then by the end of the semester, you come up to 5% Arabic and 95% English. And it's not difficult because you have to use Arabic very little, because there is another concept that you need to learn, and it's also related to the difference between EFL and ESL, which is called language ego. Language ego. Language ego. You know what do you mean by ego? No. Yes, ego, we have every learner or every person has an ego. Ego is the self. Yes. Ego means self. الذات اللغوية. Language ego. All of us are Egyptians, right? We are all Egyptians. And what's our first language? Arabic. Arabic is part of us. Arabic is part of being Egyptian. So if you come to me and tell me, forget about Arabic, don't speak Arabic, our language ego feels threatened. If you all of a sudden take the learner from the language that he has been speaking for some years at home and at play and everything, and start teaching him a new language, his language ego is affected negatively. So that's why we say you should wean off your learner. Don't start giving him English 100% of the time or all the time, because this way you will get resistance. Language ego leads to learning resistance. Learning resistance. Yes, resistance. Language resistance. So if you don't take into consideration the language of the learners when you teach him a new language, you are threatening his language ego. When you threaten one's language ego, automatically you will get learning resistance. Understand? Yes. How do you feel when I'm talking English all the time? Do you feel very, very happy, or it's okay? When I'm using Arabic, what happens? You feel that we are having the same culture. We share something in common. That's why your language ego gives you assurance that you are not stranger here. You are part of this culture. So there will not be learning resistance. If you use Arabic rarely, very little, you are ensuring that the language ego plays to your favor, not against it. Understand? So in ESL, the language ego is high or low? High, the language ego. Sometimes the students have problems because he speaks Arabic or he speaks his own native language at home, and then he goes to the school and he speaks another language. So he creates what we call dual linguistic systems, dual personalities. Dual, what's dual? Two. So, and something like a conflict happens in his personality. Am I Spanish or American? Am I Egyptian or American? a conflict happens in ESL. This conflict does not happen in EFL. In EFL, there is no conflict in the personality of the learner due to the language ego. But in ESL, there is a conflict in the personality of the learner because of the language ego. You understand? Now, back to what we were saying. In Arabic. Yes, this is a good point too. In ESL, you start abandoning your own language. In ESL, if you are learning the target language in ESL context, little by little, you will be abandoning. What do you mean by abandon? Yes, give away. You will give away your first language. Your first language will be negatively affected. Of course, we don't want this to happen. That's why we should keep a balance and we should use Arabic scarcely. What's scarcely? Yes, really. I said 5%, maximum 10%. But you should make your students feel secure that their language ego is not threatened. So using Arabic inside the classroom from time to time in a very rare situations assures the learner that he will not forget his first language and his first language is not threatened. His language ego turns not against the newcomer, it welcomes the newcomer. That it's an addition, it will not affect the learner negatively. Understand? So if we want to summarize the language ego in terms of EFL and ESL, what do we say? The language ego in EFL. Language ego works in favor of the learning process. In EFL, the language ego works in favor of the learning process. But in ESL, language ego works against the learning process. So ESL has some disadvantages. It's not a rosy garden. It has some disadvantages because it makes the learner into two persons. He gets divided between his first language and the second language. And many times there are some psychological problems that happen to the individual learner, especially if he goes to the new society when he is old, when he is, let's say, at his teens, like 14 years old or 15 years old, and his linguistic background has been formulated completely. So a new language threatens his language ego and works against the learning process of a new language. Any questions? So how many differences have we discussed? 7. We were talking here about minimizing the Arabic language as one technique to do what? To shift the pendulum from EFL to ESL. What's another technique besides minimizing Arabic use? Okay, now, another technique. What's your name? Yes? Jihad. Very good. We should not keep correcting the mistakes of our learners to give them some assurance that the target language is not that difficult. If we don't correct the errors, are we stressing accuracy or fluency? Fluency. So, one technique, minimize Arabic. Second technique is don't correct every single mistake your students make. Third technique, Your name, Iman? Iman, Very good. Encourage your students to use the target language in the classroom as much as you can. Encourage your students to use the target language in the classroom as much as you can. Through what? Asking questions. One student can read the question and another student can answer the question. Instead of you reading the question, so if you write the question on the board, ask, for example, Ali or Maha, read the question. And another student will answer the question. So minimize your talking time. There is something called teacher talking time, TTT, teacher talk time, versus STT, student talk time. The less time you talk, the more opportunity for the students to be using the language. And this way, you are shifting the pendulum to ESL. So the less time you talk, the better your students will be in the target language. Yes, I forgot your name. Hanan.
Explain words suitable to the age of the students.
Facilitate learning as much as you can. Facilitate or introduce simple, easy words as much as you can. Don't introduce difficult words, because if you do this, your students will be frustrated, and once you feel that the language or the subject matter is difficult, you will not like it. I would like to refer to another concept also. Today we are basically comparing ESL and EFL, but I'm referring to basic terminology in the field of EFL. A nice, interesting concept in the field of EFL or ESL is called affective filter. Let me write it down here. Affective filter. Notice how I'm saying it? Affective. It's not effective. It's not with an E. It's with an A. Affective means what? No. No. This is effective. Yes, related to the feelings. Affective means related to your feelings, related to the heart. So affective filter means a filter. What's a filter? Yes, murashah. So a filter is like a construct. What's a construct? No, a construct is a hypothetical phenomena that does not really exist. Like, for example, intelligence. Can we measure intelligence? Can we weigh intelligence? No. I say this person is intelligent based on his what? Behavior. Based on the consequences of what he does. So, for example, the word mind. Mind is a construct. Can we weigh mind? What do we can weigh? Brain. So we have brain is a material thing, but mind is an abstract thing. We say he thinks well, he has a good mind. We don't say he has a good brain, because we don't know whether his brain is good or not. But the brain is something you can weigh, and some people even like to eat it. They eat brains of cows or brains of sheep. This is a brain. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can measure it, you can weigh it. This is the brain. But the mind is not. So the affective filter is a hypothetical construct. Mafhum fardi. Mafhum fardi. We assume that it's there, but it's not really there, because it's something abstract. like intelligence, and like mind. So the affective filter, this affective filter exists in every learner. What does it do? It makes the learner like or dislike the subject matter he is learning. The affective filter makes the person like or dislike the subject matter he is learning. If the filter is thick, he hinders learning. Do you know the filter can be thick or thin? If it is thick, no learning will go through it because it will stop learning. If you have a filter of many layers, layers means what in Arabic? Yes, if you have a filter of many layers and you want to pour oil or water, the layers will keep the water or oil from passing through it. You understand? So the same happens when we learn something. We have affective filter, and these layers, if the filter is thick, it will prevent learning to go through it. And if it is thin, learning will go through it very easily and fast. So in every learner, there is an affective filter. And the affective filter can be thick or thin. And good teachers make the affective filter thick or thin. Huh? Again, thin. If you are a good teacher, you can manipulate your students' affective filter to make it thin. How can you make your students' affective filter thin? Tell me 5 techniques you can use in the classroom to make your students' affective filter thin. Hanan said one of them. Simplify what you are teaching. Make your teaching simple, clear, and almost to the level of your students. For example, if the student is asking you, what does this word mean? Pretty. He doesn't, this was the first time that a student sees the word pretty, and he doesn't know its meaning. Don't tell them pretty means gorgeous. You can say pretty means nice, pretty means good, pretty means okay, something that he knows. This way you are simplifying the content you are teaching to your students. So one way to make the affective filter thin is simplification. Simplify what you present to your learner. What else? How can we make our students' affective filter thin? Very good. If you don't keep correcting your students' mistakes, you're making their affective filter thin. Good. Don't correct every single error or mistake your students make. If you do this, you make the affective filter thick. If you keep correcting your students' errors, you are making your students' affective filter thick. Once it's thick, learning does not happen or does not go through quickly. What else? Important thing. Your name? Nadia. Very good. Be interesting and vary your teaching style. Lots of A's. Change the tone of your session. So use a lot of activities. Using lots of activities make your teaching more interesting. Using lots of activities makes you more interesting and makes your teaching better and more interesting. So vary your teaching techniques. Use lots of techniques to simplify the content you are teaching. And Aya, what did you say? Don't correct every single error and simplify the content you want to teach your students. One more important to make the affective filter thin is what? Very good. Respect your learner. Don't insult your learner. If you call your learner a name, calling a name means what?
Respect them.
Yes. If you call somebody a name, this is an insult. If one of your students' last name is Alfar, don't ridicule your students' names. If you do this, you're making the affective filter of the student what? Thick or thin? Thick. Once it's thick, learning will not happen. And never, never, never use corporal punishment. What's corporal punishment? Corporal, physical punishment. Don't use corporal punishment. If you use corporal punishment, automatically the affective filter of your students will be what? Very thick. Learning will not happen. Okay? So we have been talking about the affective filter, how to manipulate it to your own advantage. You should not insult your students. You should not call them names or physically abuse them. You should simplify everything. You should not correct everything. All the mistakes, every mistake they make, you should not correct. And you should not vary your own teaching techniques. Yes?
Let's share in the class and express themselves.
Very good. Welcome your students' ideas. Welcome your students' questions. If you welcome your students' questions, you are making their affective filter very thin. We have a nice saying in English, in methods class. We say about questions, the only silly question is a question that was not asked. Remember this. The only silly question is a question that was not asked. So this means that once a question is asked, it's never what? Silly. So if one of your students asks you a question, you should welcome this question. And you should not tell them, this is a silly question, sit down. If you do this, you are making his affective filter thin or thick? Thick. And if you go back with your memory to the teachers of physics or chemistry or math who taught you, basically they made you hate the subject and hate him as well. So if you are a likable person, if you try to be friendly with your students, you make the affective filter thin. This does not mean that you will break the barrier between you and your students. No, you should smile to them from time to time. You should tell them a joke from time to time, but still there has to be a barrier because you are the teacher and they are the students, and you be friendly to them. Once you are friendly, the affective very thin. Idealist, thin, very ideal, but in fact you can change them into practice. You can implement them. They are not totally idealistic, as your friend here helped me choosing the term. Understand?